Jaya Gauranitai. Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Prabhupada. Jaya Jaya Gurudev, 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 Jaya Gurudev. Jai Om Mishnapad Paramahamsa Parirajacharya Ashtatarshata Shri Srimad His Divine Grace Abhay Sharnaravind Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jai Om Mishnapad Paramahamsa Parirajacharya Ashtatarshata Shri Srimad His Divine Grace Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Maharaj Prabhupada Ki Jai. Anantakoti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai. Samaveta Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. Grantharaj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai. Jai Nitai Gaur Premanande. Can I get that table? Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Today we are reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 4, Chapter 25, the characteristics of King Purañjana. Text 56. Evam karmasu samsakta. Evam karmasu samsakta. Kamatma vanchito buddha. Kamatma vanchito buddha. Mahishi yadyad iheta. Mahishi yadyad iheta. Tattad evan vavartata. Tattad evan vavartata. Evam karmasu samsakta. Kamatma vanchito buddha. Mahishi yadyad iheta. Tattat evan vavartata. Evam karmasu samsakta. Kamatma vanchito buddha. Mahishi yadyad iheta. Tattat evan vavartata. Evam karmasu samsakta kamatma vanchito buddha mahishi adyad iheta tattat evan vavartata. Anyone else? Evam karmasu samsakta kamatma vanchito buddha mahishi adyad iheta tattat evan vavartata. Evam, thus, karmasu, in fruitive activities, samsaktaha, being too much attached, kama atma, lusty, vanchitaha, cheated, abuddhaha, less intelligent, mahishi, the queen, yat yat, whatsoever, iheta, she would desire, tat tat, all of that, eva, certainly, anvavartata, he followed. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada, Jagat Guru Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Translation. Being thus entangled in different types of mental concoction and engaged in fruitive activities, King Purañjana came completely under the control of material intelligence and was thus cheated. Indeed, he used to fulfill all the desires of his wife, the queen. Purport. When a living entity is in such bewilderment that he is under the control of his wife or material intelligence, he has to satisfy the intelligence of his so-called wife and act exactly according to her dictates. Various shastras advise that for material convenience, one should keep his wife always satisfied by giving her ornaments and by following her instructions. In this way, there will be no trouble in family life. Therefore, for one's own social benefit, one is advised to keep his wife satisfied. In this way, when one becomes the servant of his wife, he must act according to the desires of his wife. Thus, one becomes more and more entangled. In Bengal, it is said that if one becomes an obedient servant of his wife, he loses all reputation. However, the difficulty is that unless one becomes a most obedient servant of his wife, family life becomes disturbed. In the Western countries, this disturbance gives rise to the divorce law, and in Eastern countries like India, there is separation. Is there a difference between that? Separation and divorce. What is the difference? Oh, okay, the wife goes to the mother's place, the father's place. Okay. Now this disturbance is confirmed by the new introduction of the divorce law in India. Within the heart, the mind is acting, thinking, feeling and willing, and falling under the control of one's wife is the same as falling under the control of material intelligence. Thus one begets children by his wife and becomes entangled in so many activities under the control of mental concoctions. Om Jnanatimmirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namah Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadam Hyam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamsha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitamsha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namustute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Haripriyam Vansha Kalpatarubhyasya Kripa Sindhu Bhevacha Patitanam pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo namo namaham. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Gaura Bhaktarindam. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Srimad Bhagavatam is very intelligent in the way that it preaches to us. It often uses the use of allegories to teach us the hard facts of life. What is an allegory? An allegory is, it can be a story, it can be a picture, it can be a poem, which basically conceals a hidden meaning, which is the real intended meaning for us. But because we have our sensitivities, we have our material ego, we don't like to be instructed in spiritual things because of our material desires. So great preachers within Srimad Bhagavatam, they teach us the hard facts of life, of reality, as Krishna has established in his system to govern this material universe, through passive techniques, passive preaching techniques, such as allegories. For those of you who have read Srimad Bhagavatam, you'd be familiar with other allegories occurring within the Bhagavatam as well, right? Like in 5th canto, you've all read 5th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam? Who has read? Yeah, there's one allegory that comes there. Who knows what it is? The dense, dark forest of illusion. It's actually called the forest of material enjoyment. Yeah, so this is when Jada Bharat is instructing who? Rahugana. And Rahugana is a great king. He has his Kshatriya Bhav, his Kshatriya Ishvara Bhav, as it says in the Bhagavad Gita, that I'm a great ruler, and he's employing 4 people to carry his palanquin, and Jada Bharat is one of them, and he's careful not to step on the ants, and because of that, the palanquin is moving here and there, and then Rahugana gets upset with Jada Bharat, starts chastising him. But of course, Jada Bharat is a great soul. He is a pure devotee of Krishna. And he decides, by his mercy, to instruct the king. And he does so through the use of an allegory. Same way. Because the king, they have their stature, they have their ego. In this one, in the 4th canto, same thing. Narada Muni is preaching to King Prachina Bharishat. He's not an ordinary king, he's a very pious person. Right? He's following the Karma Kanda, the path of Pravriti Marg, in a very pakka way. So it would be impudent to go and directly chastise and correct such a king. So Narada Muni, being a very intelligent preacher as he is teaching the king in a very subtle way, using a third person or using an allegorical example of himself to instruct him where he's going wrong. I think it's in the 9th canto, if I'm not mistaken. There is a story of Yayati, Maharaj Yayati, who was a great king, and he came into a situation where he enjoyed sense gratification with his wife for 1,000 years. 1,000 years. And finally, he woke up from his stupor, from his illusion, and then he realized that he was just wasting his time. And then he decides to tell his wife that both of them should practice Krishna consciousness, but he does so through the example of a he-goat and a she-goat. You understand? Srila Prabhupada here is saying that, for family life to go very well, you should be a very obedient servant of your wife, fulfill her desires. This is true. And it goes both ways as well. So sometimes we need to preach to other people, considering their sensitivities. My Guru Maharaj gives the example that sometimes, you go on the street and you give someone a book and you tell them, Sarva Dharman Parityaja Mamekam Sharanam Vraja. If you tell people like that, then it's very likely that they're not going to become a devotee. They'll likely just run away or think you're crazy or something. Although he says that there was one example somewhere in the United States, a long time back, where a brahmachari approached a certain person somewhere and gave them a Bhagavad Gita, didn't say anything else. They just said that verse, Sarva Dharman Parityaja Mam Ekam Sharanam Vraja. The person who got the book fell down on the spot, came to their senses, and then ran to the temple and became a devotee. So it can happen, but usually not, right? So we have to, like a doctor administers medicine to the patient, but it's not just about administering the specific medication. You have to know how to administer the medication as well. When a child doesn't want to take medicine which is bitter, then what do the parents do? They conceal the medicine within some nice sweet lolly, right? Or some sugar or something like that. And they play some games with the child, like an airplane, the spoon coming like an airplane in their mouth. And the child gets distracted and takes the medicine. So this is exactly what Narada Muni is doing here with King Prachina Barishat. So here, the key thing is the intelligence, right? We know the example of the chariot of the body. The soul is the passenger, but the item, the thing which is actually driving the chariot is the intelligence. Sometimes it's mentioned that the intelligence is the next door neighbor of the soul. The next door neighbor of the soul. Why? Because the only thing which is separating the intelligence from the soul is what is it? No, not the mind, the false ego, right? So the intelligence is extremely subtle. It's the most subtle of the 5 elements which make up the material body. You could say the 5 gross plus the 3 subtle. So it's the most subtle of the 3 subtle ingredients. And the thing which binds it to the soul is the false ego. Now, this intelligence can be affected by the eternal enemy of the soul, which Krishna says, Nityavarna. He says it's lust, right? And in the 3rd chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna gives us some very nice insights about this lust, about the degree of its severity, about where it hides, and about the way it operates. How does it operate? It can never be satisfied. That's the hook of Maya. That it will make us think that by fulfilling just one more material desire, just one last time, one more time, we'll be completely satisfied and we won't think of it ever again, right? But that's not how Maya works. Srila Prabhupada explains in that purport in the 3rd chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, he explains that fulfilling lusty desires, fulfilling material desires is like pouring fuel onto a fire, the fire of lust. It just rages. And he says something very interesting. Right at the end of that purport, it's the last line of the purport. He says, it may be that when we fulfill our material desires, there is some feeling of happiness, Srila Prabhupada says. But then Srila Prabhupada says, but actually that happiness is the ultimate enemy of the conditioned soul. That flickering happiness that we get when we fulfill our material desires, Srila Prabhupada says, is the ultimate enemy of the conditioned soul. Therefore, the Buddhas, the intelligent persons, yehi samsparsha jabhoga dukkha yona yevate adyantavanta kaunteya na teshu ramate Buddha. The intelligent person don't engage in materialistic sensory activities because they understand that they have a beginning and an end, and they also entangle you, which is exactly the analogy which is being used here in today's purport. When we have a relationship with someone which is mutually based on fulfilling the desires of our own senses, for example, here the example is given between the husband and the wife. So sometimes the husband will ask the wife to fulfill his desires, and sometimes the wife will ask the husband to fulfill her desires. So because there's a mutual reciprocation whereby the other person is not selfless, right? I use you to fulfill my material desires. Then naturally I become indebted to you. Then naturally I become hooked to reciprocating with you. Right? So that's the example that Srila Prabhupada gives in the purport to say that when we fulfill the desires of our intelligence, we become indebted to serving that intelligence again and again and again. We get into a very tight bondage-like relationship with our intelligence, with our material desires. Where does it hide? The ultimate enemy? In the senses? In the mind? Yeah, in the intelligence. So when your senses, your sense of smell is attracted by some nice aroma, right? Or your sense of touch is wanting to touch something soft or furry or whatever, then that is a sign that lust is there in your senses. When your mind tells you to fulfill some material desire, that is an indication that lust is hidden in your mind. And the most insidious way that lust acts is when it acts through the intelligence. When your intelligence convinces you, against your will, when your intelligence convinces you that despite the fact that you know something is wrong, that you should do it anyway, that is an example of lust hidden within the intelligence. And that is the most dangerous. Because the intelligence, the spiritual intelligence, is like the last barrier to stop you from falling down. And if that gets diseased, if that gets captured or hijacked by intelligence, then that's it. As it mentions in the second chapter, right? The soul falls into the material whirlpool when the intelligence is lost. And it starts with contemplation on the objects of the senses. And of course, I mentioned that it has different degrees as well. The 3 examples given in the Bhagavad Gita is as fire is covered by smoke, as the mirror is covered by dust. So this is an even greater degree of covering of lust. The fire covered by smoke is like human beings. Sometimes through the smoke you can see the fire, right? So the fire is not that covered, right? So it's like us, like our consciousness is there, our pure consciousness is there as human beings. And if we just practice Krishna consciousness, it will ignite again. It will be a big fire. So that example is given for human beings. For the animals, which are a bit more covered, the example is given of the dust, which is covering the mirror. And then for more, let's say, conditioned creatures, materially conditioned living entities, such as fish, such as plants, their covering of lust is compared to a baby which is trapped or encased within the womb of the mother. Completely dark, you just can't escape, right? So, I remember, so these are like 3 handcuffs that Maya has shackled us with, right? Lust acting through our senses, lust acting through our mind, and lust acting through our intelligence. I remember a very long time ago, I happened to hear a nice analogy by Indra Prabhu, and he was giving an example of how Maya acts. He was using a contemporary example from New York City. So we all know, or at least from watching movies before or whatever, you would know that New York City has the subway, a very elaborate subway network, right? So this is the way that the police in the subway in New York, how they apprehend criminals, right? So you can just imagine a subway platform, you take the escalators down, and there's a big platform, just like we have now here in our metros, and it's just crowded with people, right, on both sides. People wanting to go here, there, to work, to school, this and that. And all of a sudden, right in the middle of the platform, there'll be a drunk person, right? He'll have a bottle of whiskey or whatever in his hands, and he's just like, what do they call it? When they're just inebriated and they're just dawdling, I don't know, whatever, just stumbling along, right? So the drunk person in the middle of the platform is just stumbling along with a bottle of alcohol in his hand. But in the back pocket of his jeans is a $100 bill. And it's not securely, pushed within his pocket. It's actually sort of like coming out from his pocket. And because of the trains going back and forth in the subway, the wind created by the trains is nicely fluttering this $100 bill in his back pocket. And you look at the faces of everyone on that platform, and they can also see that $100 bill. And everyone's eyes are like big, because deep down inside, they want to be the person who goes and steals that $100 bill for their own sense gratification. So everyone's watching that $100 bill on the platform. But then a really brave thief comes along, right? And he tiptoes, right? He tiptoes his way to the drunk person, and the drunk person is turning this way and that way, and the thief is going behind him so that he can't see him. And he reaches out, and the drunk person turns and he pulls his hand back, and he tries again, and then finally he pulls it, and he realizes it's actually stuck within his pocket. On purpose. And as soon as the drunk guy feels that tugging on his pocket, what does he do? Slams the handcuff on his hand. And this way the criminal is apprehended. So this is how Maya acts, right? She will entice us, specifically entice us to what we are attracted to, each individual person. That's Maya's thankless task. Whatever our weakness is, Maya knows, right? Because she's specifically empowered by Krishna, Paramatma. And she will test us in a very bespoke way. Have you heard of this word, bespoke? Bespoke means unique. Whatever is our unique weakness, we all have different material desires because we're all conditioned by the three modes of material nature in different ways. So she will put that temptation before us in a bespoke way to tempt us to fall down. But if we pass that test, we'll become very strong. Radhanath Maharaj gives a very nice example, I heard again a long time back, about how Maya can enter. So he said that you can just imagine a very big, fortified mansion. Big mansion, right? And it's got huge, high gates, right? Security personnel, people walking around with guns. I know I saw in the news article recently that a certain president of a certain country, he has a beachside estate or something like that, and to guard his estate, he's using these AI dogs with guns on the back. I'm not sure if you've seen that. The army sometimes employs, when the armies are showing their parades, they're doing the army. So along will come a regiment of mechanical dogs, right? And they'll have guns on their back. This is how we're using our intelligence these days, So he had these dogs. So you can imagine these dogs strolling, and on sight they'll shoot, right? We have the windows are barred, right? So the most sophisticated security on this mansion. And at nighttime, the people inside the house are fast asleep, thinking that they're very secure. But the house has lots of windows. And they're very nicely shut, locked, everything. But one of the windows in the basement, just one of the windows in the basement, has a tiny, tiny little crack. And it's not even fully gone through the window, it's just a little crack. And Maharaj explains that Maya can come through that crack into our consciousness. And when I heard that, I was like, wow, it's just how serious we have to be in Krishna consciousness to guard against Maya. It's a very serious thing. I came across a nice story about what happens when Maya puts us, even as devotees, under her shackles. So this is actually a story which happened to a disciple of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. It's an incident that happened in the 1930s. So there was an initiated disciple of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. He got initiated in 1933. He was from Assam, and he followed Krishna consciousness very strictly, right? Initially, he followed Krishna consciousness very strictly. He chanted Harinam, he followed the principles, he followed the instructions of his spiritual master, But then some years later, in 1937, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur left this world. After the disappearance of his spiritual master, the disciple started to deteriorate in his practices of Krishna consciousness and got engaged in anti-devotional behavior. He started consuming meat. He started breaking the four regulated principles. But even that's okay. But the real thing, which was unfortunate, is that he stopped chanting his prescribed rounds of the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. And that's when the real fall down happens. My spiritual master said when I took shelter of him, and I asked him the first time for some instructions, and he said, cling to the chanting of the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. It is your life preserver and your life enhancer. Harinam is our life preserver within Krishna consciousness, and it is our life enhancer within our Krishna consciousness. But unfortunately, this particular person, he stopped chanting the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. So, by the laws of karma, because now he was no longer under the protection of the Vaishnavas, he was no longer under the protection of Krishna, so the laws of karma took over. And within a short time, he fell sick and he died. So this is another important lesson for us, that because we're practicing Krishna consciousness, then Krishna is, let's say, taking control of whatever baggage of karma that we had, to the degree that we're surrendered to Krishna. What's that verse from the 3rd chapter? Ye yata mam praparante tam sateva prajamyam mama vartmanu vartante manusha partha sarvasha. Yeah? So to that degree, Krishna is nullifying our karma. But if we leave Krishna consciousness, if we leave the shelter of Radha Gopinath, then whatever karma was destined for us will come back and engulf us. So this person left his body shortly after he stopped chanting Harinam. Now, because he had that downfall in Krishna consciousness, what happened is his body was burnt in the cremation ground, and suddenly the dead man, actually his body wasn't burnt, he about to be burnt. You know the story? Yeah. But he came back to life, or whatever, and immediately he started shouting, Prabhupada, Prabhupada, Prabhupada. And the people present there were like shocked, like, what is this? A dead body has come to life? It was an unnatural incident. And he explained to him what happened. He actually went home immediately, and he told his family that I'm renouncing all my materialistic desires and my behaviors and my materialistic life, and I'm going back. I'm going back to the mutt, and I'm going to dedicate my life to chanting. So what actually happened was, when he died, he saw two gigantic, horrifying figures, which are the Yamadutas. They came and took him to an unknown world, which he explains was Yamapuri. Now, on the way to Yamapuri, you'll see in Srimad Bhagavatam that depending on the sinful activities of the particular person, even the path to the abode of Yamaraj is very excruciating, and a lot of suffering is involved there. Like they drag you through hot sand and things like that. But if your family is fortunate enough to do like pinda for you, then that particular person who's being dragged, he'll be given water and food and things like that. But if no one in your family is able to do it, it's a very treacherous journey. So he was taken by these Yamadutas, and when he was asked for water by the Yamadutas, they showed him a pond to quench his thirst. But when he went near that pond, he found that it was full of vomit, blood, and pus. This is his personal experience. So on complaining to them that how could he drink such filthy things, they replied that he can only get vomit to drink on his way to Yamapuri and nothing else due to his past karmas. Now just imagine, he was a devotee and he's experiencing this. So we shouldn't be complacent in our practice of Krishna consciousness, right? We should very strictly follow. After reaching Yamapuri, he was made to stand in a queue because Chitragupta was there, who is Yamaraj's scribe, and he was writing down, what should be the next, the sins and the punyas of the people, and he was giving it to Yamaraj so that he could decide what would happen next. When it came to his turn, he was considered to be a special case. So what happened is that Yamaraj asked him if he had performed any good deed in his life that he could recollect. And he answered that he got initiated by Srila Prabhupada. This is what came to his mind. He said to Yamaraj, I got initiated by Srila Prabhupada, meaning Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. Upon hearing the name of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, Yamaraj closed his eyes and remembered Srila Prabhupada. And the most amazing thing happened. You know what happened? Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur came there in the court of Yamaraj. And he started to chastise his disciple for betraying him and not following his instructions. Yamaraj asked Srila Prabhupada for the next course of action to be taken for his disciple. Before answering to Yamaraj, Srila Prabhupada directly chastised his disciple for ignoring him, for ignoring Harinam, and for getting involved in anti-devotional behaviors. And upon hearing the chastisement, his disciple begged for forgiveness, which Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur gave. And in that situation, at that place, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur instructed his disciple that you go back and you take initiation from my disciple, Srila Bhakti Daita Madhav Goswami Maharaj in Kolkata. So that's what happened. So as soon as Srila Prabhupada asked him to take initiation, then he woke up in that graveyard, in that cremation ground, and immediately ran. He went to that particular Maharaj, and that Maharaj, he was in meditation, chanting japa. He opened his eyes, and he told this particular disciple, I already know that you're coming to me, because Srila Prabhupada told me that you're going to come to me, and I have to initiate you. So this particular person took initiation from Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, and it's explained he lived for 8 more years. All he was seen doing is just chanting Hare Krishna. And then he had a successful death. But it is Maya's business, and especially for devotees, to push them down, to stop us from our progress in Krishna consciousness. That is her thankless task. Now, in Srimad Bhagavatam, this is described in the 11th canto. So one day what happened, long time back, what happened is that, the 4 Kumaras, so Sanak, he approached his father, Lord Brahma, and he asked him a very important question for all of us. He said that people's minds are naturally attracted to material sense objects, and similarly, sense objects in the form of desire enter within the mind. So it's a two-way streak, right? With our senses, we interact and meditate upon sense objects, and sense objects themselves force themselves into our senses, right? Therefore, how can a person who desires liberation, who desires to cross over the activities of sense gratification, destroy this mutual relationship between the sense objects and the mind? Please explain this to us. Srimad Bhagavatam explains that Lord Brahma himself was confused about the question because he was engaged in the activities of creation. So sometimes Srila Prabhupada mentions elsewhere in his purports to the Srimad Bhagavatam that not all the Lord Brahmas in each universe, not every Lord Brahma within a universe is a devotee of Krishna. Some Lord Brahmas are Gyanis, some Lord Brahmas are yogis, some Lord Brahmas are karmis, non-devotees. We're very fortunate that in our universe, Chaturmukhi Brahma is a devotee of Lord Krishna, and he has seen Lord Krishna several times as well. He's interacted with Lord Krishna. He's chanted the Brahma Samhita as well. So, Brahma asked the same question to a particular incarnation of Krishna long time back, and this is what he relays to his son Sanaka, and the 4 Kumars. So what happened is one day Brahma was pondering about the same thing. And lo and behold, who came? A great swan came. And that swan, it came and landed on a very beautiful post. That swan was the Hamsa avatar of Krishna. The Hamsa avatar of Krishna. And Lord Brahma approached that Hamsa avatar and he asked the Hamsa avatar, "Who are you?" Right? Who are you? And the Hamsa avatar said, "If you think that I am a jiva soul just like you, then what is the use in asking such a question to me? Because there's no difference between me and you. You're a jiva, I am a jiva, we're all conditioned souls. Why am I so special? Why is your question so special to me?" Then he asks, "If you think that I am this material body, then also your question has no meaning. Because this material body is not singular in nature, it's a combination of 5 Pancha Mahabhutas, right? Earth, water, fire, air, and ether. So instead of asking, who are you should be asking the question, who are you 5? What are these 5 material elements that comprise of you?" Basically what Hamsa Avatar was saying, or trying to get across to Brahma, was that you're asking a very nice question, but until you are completely freed from the materialistic conception of life, you cannot understand me. It's not possible for you to understand me. So these questions, if you ask them with a materialistic conception, you're not going to understand the answer fully. You have to be practicing Krishna consciousness, at least to some degree, to be able to understand answers which are given by Lord Brahma and devotees within the parampara. My dear sons, the mind has a natural proclivity to enter into the material sense objects, and similarly the sense objects enter into the mind. But both this material mind and the sense objects are merely designations that cover the spirit soul, who is part and parcel of me, the Hamsa Avatar says. So, he says something else. This is his instruction, right, to Brahma. He says, how do you overcome this mutual tug of war between the sense objects and the senses? He says, according to my instructions, one should fix the mind on me alone. If, however, one continues to see many different values and goals in life, rather than seeing everything within me, then although apparently such a person is awake, one is actually dreaming due to incomplete knowledge, just as one may dream that one has awakened from a dream. So are we dreaming right now? You're awake, right? Are you awake or are you sleeping? Huh? You're awake? Okay. Awake means that you know what is the reality. So do you know the reality that you are not this body, you're not this mind, and that you're the soul? Or are you still attached to your material desires? Huh? So your eyes may be wide open, but Srimad Bhagavatam says you're still sleeping. So being awake doesn't mean that you're just, walking around, your eyes are open, and you're doing things in this material world. Being awake means being illuminated to the reality, to the truth of our relationship with Krishna. So there's the sleeping dream, and then there's the waking dream, according to Srimad Bhagavatam. So the way to circumvent this harassment by Maya, which is imposed on the conditioned soul, is to see the material energy connected to Krishna. That is the solution. That's what Hamsa Avatar is telling Lord Brahma. When you see sense objects as being connected to me, then you'll see them as not objects of your enjoyment, but someone else's property to be used for them. But if you see material objects, sense objects, as being disconnected from Krishna, then you will think that they are for my pleasure. This is the teaching of Hamsa Avatar in the 11th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. So today is Mahashivratri. So Shiva itself means auspicious, and we're talking about being conditioned in this mature world, yeah? And we just talked about how we can become free from condition, at least according to the teachings of Hamsavatar. So one personality who is definitely free from the influence of Maya is Lord Shiva. Why? Because he's the husband and the controller of Maya, Devi herself. So I thought I could just glorify for maybe 5-6 minutes, tell a story about Lord Shiva. Because many things happened on Mahashivratri. Just like on Diwali, a lot of different things happen as well, right? We celebrate Damodar Leela and so many other things. So Mahashivratri, many things happen, but it's said that this is the day where Lord Shiva and Parvati were married, right? Now, we all know what happened in the Daksha Yagya, in the 4th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, right? When Lord Shiva was married to Sati, right? And her father, Daksha, was performing a great sacrifice, and all the demigods were there in the assembly, and then Daksha comes walking into the assembly. It's explained that his body was shining and it was effulgent, and all the demigods stood up to respect him except for 2 personalities, Lord Brahma and Lord Shiva. Now, he could understand why Lord Brahma didn't stand up, because that was his father. But why Lord Shiva, who is the brother of Daksha, materially speaking, why didn't Lord Shiva get up? So this greatly, upset Daksha. He was insulted by the fact that Lord Shiva didn't stand up for him. And then we know what happened. There was a slinging of insults. Daksha insulted Lord Shiva. Lord Shiva, of course, being a very detached personality, transcendental personality, he didn't say anything. He didn't open his mouth. But his attendants, the hobgoblins and the bhutas and Nandi, they started counter-cursing the brahmanas and the demigods and all this. And there was a lot of chaos. Some demigods lost their teeth, and it was just chaos. Pushta or someone like that lost his teeth, I remember. And Lord Shiva just, got away from there. So what happened is that Sati, his wife, self-immolated herself, right? Later on, we learned that. So it ended in a disaster, basically. So what happened? What happened to Sati next? So Himaraj or Parvatraj, Parvat means mountain, right? So his wife was called Menaka, and they wanted to have a child. So at that time, Narad Muni came, and Narad Muni told Parvatraj or Himaraj and his wife Menaka that they should worship Uma, which is another name of Sati. You should worship Uma, and in this way you'll have a very nice child. So both Himaraj and Menaka, they engaged in very severe tapasya and penance, and because they were worshipping Uma, Sati, who after she was, she took Sati, after she was self-immolated, she came and she entered the womb of Menaka. And she was born as Parvati. So how is that name Parvati there? Because she's the daughter of Parvatraj. So generally you'll see this in Sanskrit, that the sons, right, they're called by a similar name to their mother or father, or their ancestors. Usually the A is elongated. So you have Pandu and then you have Pandavas, right? Kuru, Kauravas, like that. So she was called Parvati, who is the daughter of Parvatraj. So she came to a marriageable age. She wanted to get married to a very great personality. Of course, she was Sati herself. So then again the same person came, Narad Muni came, and he said, if you want a very good husband, then you should engage in very severe penance and worship Lord Shiva. So Parvati went to the Himalayas and she engaged in very severe tapasya and penance, and it was so strong that the earth started to shake and great intense heat was created by Parvati's tapasya. And the demigods started to get worried about what was going to happen. So Lord Brahma approaches Lord Shiva and he tells Lord Shiva that you got to do something about this, because this heat is going to destroy the universe. It's going to greatly affect us. So at that time, Lord Shiva decides that he will become the husband of Parvati. Now, when Lord Shiva agrees to that, and Himaraj, Parvatraj finds out that my daughter has found, a very nice husband, Lord Shiva doesn't want the same thing to happen as what happened with Sati. He's very careful now. He wants to have a good impression with his father-in-law. So one day Himaraj invites Lord Shiva to come to his palace for dinner. Now before in the Daksha Yagya, Lord Shiva just appeared, with matted hair and with ashes and just in his tiger skin cloth, right? He appeared like that. This time, Lord Shiva decided to dress in a beautiful crown, right? Very nice clothing, right? And he went to the house of Himaraj. But before he went there, he told Himaraj that I'm only going to bring one person with me. Now, Himaraj was not happy with that. He was thinking that Lord Shiva was going to bring a lot of people with him, because it's his daughter's wedding, right? She's going to get married to this personality. It should be a big thing. The celebration should be a very grand and pompous occasion. Why is my son-in-law to be just bringing one person with him? And on top of that, Lord Shiva told Himaraj that this particular person that I'm bringing, his name is Kundodara. Have you heard of this, Kundodara? He was a very peculiar person. He was a dwarf, very short person. He had a bald head, and his stomach was massive, huge stomach he had. That's why his name was Kundodara, because Udara means, like we have Damodara, so Udara means the stomach. Kund means like a lake. So his stomach was the size of a great lake. And Himaraj didn't know what he was in for. So he thought only 2 people are going to come. Okay, I'll just make, something simple. Just, a few plates of prasad, a few pots of prasad, like that. So anyway, Lord Shiva enters the house of Himaraj. And then both Kundodara and Lord Shiva sit down, and Kundodara says, I'm hungry. He says to his master, Lord Shiva, I'm hungry. Lord Shiva tells Himaraj, please get him some prasad. They put a plate of prasad in front of Kundodara, and within one gulp, Kundodara takes the whole plate and puts it in his mouth. Not only does he eat the prasad, he eats the plate as well. And then Himaraj gets startled. Bring more prasad, bring more prasad. So from the kitchen, the cooks, they're cooking, they bring more plates of prasad, put 5-6 plates in front of him. He just picks it up, tosses it in his mouth. They just disappear like that. And it's explained that they were sitting at the end of a very long table. And Himaraj and his servants, they were like pushing plates of prasad down that table. And he was sitting at the other end just with his mouth open and just entering into his mouth. And at one point, Lord Shiva said, what's the use of keeping him outside? Take him into the kitchen itself. So they took Kundodara into the kitchen. And he was just wreaking havoc there. Like whatever prasad they cooked, he was just eating it and eating it. And it came to a point where Himaraj was like, I don't know what to do anymore. I can't take care of your guest. And at that time, Lord Shiva asked Himaraj, so would you like me to bring the others now? Right, because he was expecting a whole retinue of Lord Shiva's followers to come. So when Lord Shiva asked him, would you like me to bring the rest of my followers now? Then Himaraj just sort of broke down. He said, no. Anyway, Lord Shiva said, don't worry, I'll bring them. And then hordes of people came. All these bhutas and pretas and hobgoblins and, ferocious living entities in the mode of ignorance. They came into the palace of Himaraj, took their seats, And, Himaraj was just sweating and panting, and he didn't know what to do. He didn't want to offend Lord Shiva. So, at that time, Lord Shiva exhibited his Amrita Drishti, his glance of nectar. He told his followers that think of whatever food you like, and just by my glance upon your face, that food will appear before you. So someone just desired gulab jamuns. Immediately there was a golden pot with full of gulab jamuns just right in front, and the person started eating. Like this, one by one, each of the followers of Lord Shiva started to desire different things to eat, food to eat. Lord Shiva just glanced at their face, and it just appeared before them. Not just a little plate, but a huge bowl full of prasad just appeared before them. And they just started eating, and there was a big, massive feast. And this really made Himaraj dumbstruck, right? So the whole feast happened, it finished, and then Lord Shiva was departing from the house of Himaraj. And at that time, he gave up his crown, he gave up his opulent clothing, and he again smeared himself with ashes. He again put the cobras and the deadly snakes around his neck. And he turned around and he said to Himaraj, so now you see my opulence and my power. I am actually going to be married to Maya herself, material energy herself, and I am her controller. So it may look that I'm living in a very impoverished condition, materially speaking, but actually I have all the opulence of the entire universe at my hand. But my real opulence is that I'm not attached to it. So this is the opulence of Lord Shiva, that he has Maya herself, Durga Devi herself, at his disposal, in the sense to serve him. But he's not allured, he's not attracted. In fact, he controls Maya. So we should take a lesson of Lord Shiva on this day of Mahashivratri, that Vaishnavas should also be like this. Because we worship Lord Krishna can take away our material opulences, and if he thinks that we are qualified, he can give us more material opulence that we can even handle. Right? But at the same time, our attraction for Lord Krishna, for Gopinath, should be more than our attraction to these material facilities. And in this way, we'll be able to use the material facilities in Krishna's service through Yukta Vairagya, and at the same time not fall down. But we will stay equanimous and sober like Lord Shiva. So I thought that was a good story to tell. I don't think devotees have heard that many times, but it is a story of Mahashivratri because today is the day that Lord Shiva wedded Parvati. So thank you very much for listening. It's past 9 o'clock, so I won't take any questions. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Jagat Guru Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Jai Nitai Gaur Premanande.